Hi everybody, welcome to the Community Conversations, our first one here. At the Drake, I will be on the panel as well. We have a number of people here. We have Jason Marsden, who is remotely coming in. He's the Executive Director of the Matthew Shepard Foundation. He was also a friend of Matthew Shepard. This is Christine Walker. She's the Executive Director of the Provincetown International Film Festival. She's also a Hollywood producer and one of our neighbors. And this is Tim McCarthy, who is a gay archivist and activist and has been to how many countries? 93 countries. How many continents?
All 7.
All 7 continents in search of to witness gay life in these places around the world, globally. This is Leigh Fondakowski. She is a writer and director of our production. She's a writer of the head writer of the Tectonic Theater Company. She was the assistant director with Moises Kaufman on the original production. She is a director in her own right, and thank God we got her to come here. And the direction of the Laramie Project. And Richard... Ed, I'm sorry.
Lampton.
Please, Ed Lampton is a poet. You lived in Laramie, Wyoming? Tell them who you are, because he's new to me.
I will be brief, I promise. I'm Ed Lampton, born and raised in Montreal, Canada. I'm very familiar with hate crimes. My father was a personal bodyguard of Jackie Robinson, so I grew up hearing about that whole experience. My very close soulmate was a teacher at the University of Wyoming. When Matthew was killed that particular day, she called and asked if I would consider writing a poem for the Shepards. And I said, that's a very difficult task, as any writer would know. What do you put in words to assuage a type of horrific feelings that they must have experienced? So I wrote this poem, and when you're ready, I would be happy to read it.
I would love for you to read it.
Want to do it now? Okay.
To start.
Brief preface. I wrote this poem in memory of Matthew Shepard, and now I am with you today to share, as well as to acknowledge all victims of discrimination. Life matters, period. Nothing more, nothing less. It's entitled, I Am You. I am you. It's that simple. To think otherwise is to accept our differences, like gender, race, and nationality, which are all short-lived anyhow. Better yet, to realize our commonality, which is about humanity yielding to spirituality, which is eternal. Remember then, please, that flesh separates and that spirit unites. Everything else is superfluous. Nothing else matters but this. I am you. I am. I didn't read it. She did. My friend.
At the service,
Yes.
for Matthew Shepard, when he in Laramie, Wyoming. But I'm going to give it over to Christine Walker, because she is our moderator.
Yes, and let me ask you a quick question, Ed. Are you, I didn't hear, are you a resident of Provincetown? You're here or just
I live in
visiting?
Dennis.
You live in Dennis? Oh, fantastic.
The hub of the cave.
We thought the hub was Provincetown. So thank you for having me here, Provincetown Theater, and David and Furman. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I just want to say I think it's great that you're doing these community talkbacks, especially about a play that is so important and it has had such a long life and an important life to all of us here, to you, Ed, and to the world. So these talkbacks, from what I understand and love about them, is that ours in particular is called The Tragedy, the Play, and the Call to Action. And my goal is to keep us sort of in that realm, although it was nice to start with your poem because it really does start with a very intimate personal experience. And even though we're going to talk about the call to action and sort of the influence the play has had and the influence Matthew Shepard's life has had on legislation and action, I think it's important to start with the fact that it did start with this very, and I think people responded to this story because of our personal connection and because of, it's about this man's life. And so anyway, I wanted to first open with asking Jason a question. It's, I'd love for you to talk about the recent announcement about where Matthew Shepard's remains will finally be kept. Can you share the details and talk a little bit about that, how that came about, so forth?
Sure, and thanks for having me. Appreciate what you're doing very much, and that you're doing so many talkback sessions is really wonderful. This play is increasingly the major way that people learn about Matt's story, particularly college and high school students who were not yet born or very young when all this happened. And I'm so grateful that it helps keep Matt's story alive. When Matt was killed 20 years ago this week, he had never expressed any wishes about burial, cremation. The Shepards didn't have a family plot. They were a young family. They hadn't given any thought to those kinds of plans. And they found themselves reeled back into the US from 7,000 miles away, and in the middle of intense media scrutiny and all of the aspects of the personal tragedy that they suffered, in addition to the national and international outcry about it. They found themselves kind of without a plan and uncertain what to do. The thought of burying Matt in the local cemetery in Casper, and then flying back to the other side of the world for untold years to come, gave them a feeling that made them really uncomfortable. The idea that Matt would be alone and so far from them, and the practical aspects of wanting to make sure the gravesite didn't turn into a magnet for vandalism or a point of pilgrimage that would be a nuisance to other families with loved ones in the cemetery. And so they kind of put their trust in the idea that at some point or another, the right place would make itself known to them at the appropriate time. And they've been good friends with Bishop Gene Robinson for many years, and have been active with doing programs at the National Cathedral in Washington, and have stayed in touch with the leadership there over the years. And a mutual friend of all of those folks suggested they take a look at perhaps interring him in a church, and that the National Cathedral had a few hundred notable Americans at rest there. And they put in a request, and the cathedral leadership was delighted to agree, and then it all came together fairly quickly within the last couple of months. So it was quite a surprise when Judy called me up one day a couple months ago and said, all right, we made a decision about where we want to put Matt to rest, and he'll be at the National Cathedral. And I was just so grateful that the stars lined up for that. I think it's something that Matt would find meaningful himself, were he able to understand that this is happening. And I'm just really glad that people of goodwill who want to pay their respects in the future will be able to, but it will be in a safe and secure place where the Shepards can be free from worry of anything antisocial being done to the gravesite. You know, my now husband and I were at the funeral 20 years ago, and in ordinary circumstances might well have been followed by a graveside ceremony, and that hasn't happened. And to be able to go in a few weeks and be part of that closure is humbling. I'm really quite pleased that he'll be remembered. You know, this play is something that helps the people in it be remembered. We've already lost Marge Murray and Rob Debris, who both passed away in recent years. The day will come sooner than any of us want when all those characters are gone, and indeed when all of us are gone. But I think this play will still be out there and I'm pretty sure that cathedral will still be standing, and those elements of our historical canon will help Matt's story be remembered for times to come, so that people continue to draw inspiration and hope from it.
That's amazing. You know, I'm struck by, I was watching the TV version, we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but, and seeing it again, I'm struck about how religion plays such a prominent role in the piece, both as a source of homophobia and hate, and then one of love and acceptance. How involved? I mean, obviously with the Episcopalian Church, you're involved with the. They'll be very involved in with you, but how involved are you in working with all kinds of religious groups?
We receive invitations from congregations fairly frequently. Judy has spoken at, I don't even know how many churches over the last 20 years. I've spoken at a few myself. Some of the youth groups that we work with are church-based. Most are school-based, but many are church-based. I have found myself behind the lectern on the pulpit of a church more than once, which is still a kind of strange way to look at a church from my perspective. I'm used to sitting in the pews, but we're finding that more and more congregations over time are adopting an open and affirming doctrine about LGBTQ people participating in the life of the institution. And obviously there's the opposite side of religious faith in America, and they continue to be adversaries in our work. From time to time, we find ourselves in an oppositional relationship with a given clergy or nonprofit organization, such as Focus on the Family. But by and large, faith has been a positive element, and an increasingly positive one in recent years in our work.
Right. I actually grew up Mormon, and grew up in Utah, and so it's very interesting to think about the impact of excommunication on Russell's life, and so I'm glad you're working with other religious groups. I want to have one more question, then I'm going to work into talking to our other amazing guests. But can you talk to us a little bit about the kinds of work that your organization does do? I'm sure you have a lot of requests to get involved in a number of issues. And so can you, is it education? Tell us a little more.
Sure. At the core of our work, because counting the intern, we're 9 people and not everyone is full-time, we have to be really careful not to be spread too thin. And we've developed strategic direction over the years. I think we continue to get more thoughtful and targeted in our work. But what underscores our work is finding opportunities to inspire and activate people to take on the work of advancing understanding, compassion, and acceptance, and opposing and sidelining hatred in their daily lives, through their networks, through their workplace, through the schools that they or their children or grandchildren attend, in work with community-based organizations as well as national organizations such as ours. We believe Washington has a role to play in improving civil rights for everyone, but not the definitive role. We have seen the business world, Wall Street and corporate America, advance workplace equality, and they have an important role to play, but not, I think, the most important one. And we've seen the entertainment industry advance visibility in our narrative for our community, and that's been great, but I don't think it, in the end, will solve the problem. What I think will solve the problem is countless millions of people deciding that the problem should be solved and being willing to take part in it in their daily lives through their interactions with others. And Judy and Matthew Shepard are incredibly powerful figures who can and frequently do inspire people to take on that charge. And so in evaluating the programmatic work we do, we're always looking to test whether it in fact leverages moving people from complacency to action. What some of those things look like: certainly public speaking engagements, certainly support for artistic legacy works about Matt, including the Laramie Project plays. We support community discussions after performances of Considering Matthew Shepard, the new choral oratorio that is touring the country right now. We continue to promote people using Judy's book in their book clubs and for summer reads at universities. Directly, we think people we could inspire who might be the most helpful of all are community safety and law enforcement professionals. So we conduct accredited trainings for police and prosecutors all over the country. We show them case examples, we bring in experts, civil rights prosecutors, peace officers, and put on trainings that vary from a few hours to a few days in length and intensity, and get them post or CLE credits for their participation so that we leave behind more law enforcement infrastructure in communities around the country should something like this, God forbid, happen in their jurisdiction, to better ensure that justice will be obtained. And finally, working with our own community to help sensitize them to the dangers of hate crimes, working with other communities, racial, religious, ethnic, national origin, because we believe a hate crime against any minority group is a hate crime against all minority groups. Trying our best to supplement the lack of training that either cadets or veteran officers have received during their careers around this topic.
Oh, it's amazing. Thank you. Which brings me to David. So we're here in Provincetown, and you think this play needs to be shown in Wyoming and in Utah and in some of these places that are less, they're not the LGBTQ meccas of the world like Provincetown is. What made you want to bring the play here?
Leigh. Really, no, when I say that is, when I got this job really December, when I guess it was announced, and I got a lot of congratulations from people in my community, my life, my showbiz community, and Leigh Fondakowski is a friend, although we've never worked together until now, and we had parallel stuff going on, and many mutual friends, and she said, congratulations, I'd love to come and direct the Laramie Project for you in Provincetown. And immediately I said yes, not knowing where exactly how it would work, but I just said yes. It was exactly the kind of play, substantial play. It has become a modern American classic. It was cited by the New York Times this year as one of the most important American plays in the last, since Angels in America, the most important 25 plays. But beyond that, I love the play, so I don't need the New York Times to tell me that, but it's nice to be in the canon. And Leigh was a creator, and so she was a creator. I thought this is a rare opportunity for local designers, for local actors, for all of us local audiences to have a person who was there on the ground, who's in the play, doing the interviews, shaping the whole production as the head writer, working hand in hand with the entire company and the directors, going through the hard questions of what do we need, why do we need it, whose voice is important, who do we not leave out, and fighting all of that is inside this woman and her artistry, and that would enhance all of us, that will go much further. And it's the kind of direction that I want to take the entire institution in as we move down the road, is pulling what, hopefully, and in fact, Leigh has led me to our playwright residency acceptor, which will be announced shortly, a young woman, who will be our first lesbian in the Playwrights Lesbian Playwright Program. Who's got her first play at Lincoln Center, and she's wonderful. We're going to do one of her plays next season. So it's part of building, it's community creating. I'm starting to create connections from the larger new theater world into our world, because we deserve to have those kinds of experiences and those kinds of people out here. You don't have to just go to Boston, you know, to have that, or a big city. You can have it right here and have top-notch theater here. What's interesting when you look at the Laramie Project, just and one other detail about why this play, most of the characters in the Laramie Project are heterosexual characters. This is the gayest company we've ever had, right? She can speak more to that. And so it, you know, all along it was an entrance into the larger population to include, so that you could find a way in as a straight person into this world, and gay people could go, what are straight people thinking? You know? So, or whatever, we could come together on a wrong and understand how this kind of hate crime fit into, as Jason was talking about, it fits into all of the hate crimes, that this kind of anger and action upon a group hits all of our groups. And so part of my job here too is not just to speak to only the LGBTQ community within the Provincetown town limits. It is to speak to the whole Cape. I mean, we had people from Plymouth here last night. We had a young lesbian and her father came here, a teenager. She's a young actress, came from Upton, Massachusetts, in 2 hours in to see this production, see this play. She's been worked with the Matthew Shepard Foundation a little bit, and so she is the next generation. I'll cry, you know, the next generation coming up, and we are pulling these people and their people in too. So if I can be some kind of beacon with the institution that invites everybody in and knows that they're going to get substantial theater, real substantial theater here, with what we've done this season so far, and this is one of that's the 20th anniversary became, you know, a touchstone. Like, how do we really honor this in a big way? And this talk is one of them. Yeah. And this will continue, these conversations, not for Patsy Cline, although, you know, but for other plays down the road, we will have, if the thing is right, to have open up a discussion about how it affects our lives, how a piece of art can transfer into changing us.
Well, and to that, and so Leigh, you're coming to Provincetown, and as a filmmaker myself, I'm always thinking about audience, and so you're in Provincetown, gayest town in America. What did you, what did you, when you're directing the play, are you thinking about it as sort of an educational tool, or maybe even a cathartic experience for people, if you are in Provincetown, as opposed to, say, if you were showing this play in Laramie, Wyoming, or some town on the Iron Range in Minnesota or something? Do you think about who your audience is going to be and maybe change the direction?
That's interesting. Not consciously.
Okay.
Not consciously, although that Jonas was very gay. Remember Jonas was twirling his little scarf? That was the gayest Jonas we've ever had. I just sort of let him like unleash. It was like unleash here in Provincetown. But not consciously. I mean, I think in the foreground of my mind is making the best connection that I can make, right? So what does the theater as a medium do best, and trying to bring that out, right? So the poetry of the lighting and the costuming and the staging that we decided early on we wanted to feel like we were all in the same room talking. And so we kind of intentionally did this minimalist piece where the actors could just sort of take hold of the story and really, it's been amazing to me that it has become an educational touchstone. So it's amazing to me what has happened with the play. When we went to Laramie the first time, we didn't go saying we were going to write a play. We went there saying, do we as artists have a role to play in the national conversation that was happening around the map? Because it was the first time that an anti-gay hate crime had gotten national attention. It was like the first time that the world sort of stood up and said, wait a minute, this is wrong. Even though many, many, many gay people were killed and still are. But Matt, I don't know, it was a watershed moment, right? So we went as a company just to see what would happen if we went there. And we were not convinced that there was a play after the first trip. 10 of us went there. We collected a bunch of material. It was the fastest playwriting process of my life. We wrote a draft in 2 weeks. We took all the material and we wrote a draft in 2 weeks. And we presented it, and it took us up to Matthew's death. That was the draft. And we read it, and people, cried, and, it was sad. And then we kind of looked at each other like, well, yes, sad, but is it a drama? Is there enough drama for a play, or is it just a moment? And then we went back for the trial of Russell Henderson. And you could feel the conversation in the town shift from shock and outrage at the hate crime to, oh my God, are we going to put A.J. McKinney to death? Like the conversation shifted, and that's when it clicked. Oh, this play is a document of a town going through a struggle, going through an event. And so we went back multiple times and documented their journey over the course of a year, and that became the play. So the play, it is the story of Matt. Matt's story is woven into it. It's the reason we're here, but the organizing principle of the play is the story of the town, right? So to me, like thinking about Provincetown, when I went back to New York, people would, while I was here, and they say, how's it going? And I say, it's amazing. It's like a small town doing a play about a small town. To me, it's like the community and the community of Laramie here, it's like the same size and feels similar, like everybody knows everybody. And so to have just the people, that you see in the play walking down the street and in the shops, and that feels like Laramie. So that to me was the most exciting thing. I guess it's a gay town, but to me it was like the scope of the town and the community that's here feels very much like Laramie. As close to Laramie as when we did the play in Laramie.
Yeah. So I understand, and Carmen told me this, that you went from a 3-act structure to a 2-act structure in this production. And
I was thinking, David, you should have said it was the world premiere of the 2-act structure.
Yeah. I still can.
I was thinking.
I can go write a press release right now.
I was thinking that today as I was packing up. I'm leaving today, and I'm really sad to leave. I've had such an amazing time here. Thank you, David, and Ermin, and the board, and the cast, and everyone. It's been amazing to be here. But as I was packing up, I was like, oh, this was the world premiere of the 2-act structure. We never could figure out. We were under great pressure in New York to, when we premiered it at Union Square Theater, to make it 2 acts. The producer said it's too long. Nobody wants 2 acts. You got to do it. And we didn't do it. We couldn't figure out how to do it. We tried it in different places, breaking it, and it just never felt right. So we stuck to our guns. We did the 3-act structure, and then the play wasn't a success in New York. But then, 20 years later, I was in Washington, D.C. at a high school production, and the high school drama teacher figured it out. And I was sitting there in the audience, and I said, oh my God, she figured it out. And at the end, I found her at the act break, and I was like, you figured out the 20-year-old problem. And so the way she structured it was, when the person comes in to talk about the vigils going around the world, she kept the vigil on stage. And so there's like 4 scenes that happen after that, but she wove them into the vigil. The same way that I did. That's stolen. I didn't do that. I told her, I got permission to steal it. I said, I'm directing this and I'm stealing your act break. And the way she understood, the play is written in moments. It's not written in scenes. It's written in moments. And she understood that you could create that moment and then weave in the other moments to make it seem like one moment. Yeah. And so that's why we broke it there, because of that high school drama teacher.
We can still learn from high school.
Yes, we can.
Yes,
they're amazing. They're amazing.
So you mentioned that you didn't anticipate that it would be the kind of educational tool that it was. At what point in the process did that occur to you? And at what point did you realize that this story would have resonance, unfortunately, still has tremendous resonance, and even more, I think, than maybe when I first saw the film, and that was what my first introduction to the Laramie Project was through a film, and that was like, 2002 when it came out. So at what point did you say this has, I mean, because then 10 years later you wrote, wrote another piece. What?
Well, I still am shocked at how resonant it is. I'm waiting for the moment that this play feels outdated and that it feels historical, and it really should by now, you know. But it does not. It's still. I mean, when Zubaida says we are like this, we are like this, I was like, oh my God, we are like this. You know, it's like chilling, really. But as I said, yes, really. So we premiered the play in Denver, which was the closest regional theater to Laramie. And then we moved it to New York. And it was not successful in New York. It didn't run for as long as we had hoped. Ben Brantley gave it a mixed review. He said we weren't hard enough on the people of the town. That we had become too sympathetic towards them. And we weren't tough enough. And so, you know, New York Theater, the New York Times Review kind of makes or breaks it. So then it was over, and we were characters in it, so we thought it had its moment, it was a beautiful experience, but it's over. And then we did the HBO film, which, you know, many people in the company did not want to do the HBO film, because the play is about ordinary townspeople. And the HBO film had to be filled with stars in order to get made, right? So there was this debate going back and forth. And we're a company that debates. We're, arguing folk. And it can be heated sometimes. You know, the play has this integrity. We can't do this. We're selling out. Blah blah. But then Moises said something very interesting. He said, "Listen, you have to think about the kid who's sitting alone." In some small town somewhere, who's never going to have access to the play. So the play will be seen by maybe thousands if you're lucky, but HBO will be seen by millions of people. And that's when we said that we have to do it. We have an obligation to do it, right? So it's a little strange because it's like, my sister Romaine, she's a good friend of Matthew's, and your brain goes, no, that's Christina Ricci. She was in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. But then you just sort of go with it, right? So it's a little weird like that because it's filled with stars, but those people showed up with ready to tell this story. So there's something very beautiful about the film, but it was after the film we thought, okay, well that was something. High schools started to do the Laramie Project, and colleges started to do the Laramie Project, and community theaters started to do the Laramie Project, and regional theaters started to do the Laramie Project. It was like, what is happening with this? And it just was like a groundswell, very unexpected, very, very surprising. But when I work with young people now, there's something about this play, maybe it's because of the ordinary language or the people that they can relate to, they take a hold of it. It's very personal to them. They really take a hold of it, and it's been inspiring to see the theater have that kind of capacity with young people. Like Furman plays Harry Woods, which is one of my favorite characters in the play, the 52-year-old man. In this same production that I saw recently in DC, there was a freshman in high school. How old are you when you're a freshman in high school? You're 13 or 14 years old, right? And he stood up and he said, I'm 52 years old and I'm gay. And I mean, it literally took my breath away. It's like, in what universe can that boy play Harry Woods? And that's what the theater does best, right? And so these kids get a chance to play this array of characters. It's amazing. It's an amazing testament to the art form.
Yeah. So Tim, you've been a long time activist and archivist, and do you remember? You must when Matthew Shepard passed away, and can you talk about what that felt like and what was happening at the time for you? And maybe a little bit about
well, okay, context. Before I go into that answer, the thing I want to really point out here is you've heard the word story, 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 because that's what human beings are all about. We're all about our story. We want to know your story and we want you to know our story, okay? That's what this is really all about. Now, so to answer your question, the context of my story is I'm sitting there with HIV, all right? And the latest drugs had just come out only 2 years before. 98, 96 is when those HIV drugs came out. But I didn't take them. I didn't believe in them because the early drugs were killers of my friends. So the context I'm living in is a Holocaust. There are thousands of us dying and dying and dying, and nobody's paying attention to it. Nobody at all. And we're act up. We're out there making goddamn sure that people understand what's happening. And it's because of ACT UP that those drugs became available. So we're there, and the drugs come out, and we as a community go, we've just spent 15 years or more fighting, and finally we've got a result. And we're feeling somewhat complacent. We feel that the society around us is finally recognizing our value. And then you jump 2 years forward, and what happens? The most blatant, horrible thing that just undercut us, slashed us, the legs out from under us. No, we weren't valued by this society. It didn't matter how much we fought. It didn't matter how much we died. Look at the way they were reacting to the murder of one of us. A brutal, horrible murder. Just as that judge said, this was not somebody just doing a heated argument. No, this is a protracted hour after hour after hour murder. That was a 20-something hour murder that took place. So, for me, that's the way I felt about it.
Tough act to follow.
I know.
Tough act to follow.
But that anger, that rage led to activism, and it led to changes in legislation, or did it? When we talk about changes, and we're talking about hate crimes, how much of the Matthew Shepard story and all of the education and Laramie Project, how much of that led to hate crime legislation?
You can't sustain what I just did a few moments ago forever. You just can't, right? As a human being, we don't have that. Our outrage wears out after a time. But you're left with the fact that you actually did something, you actually took some action, and you saw that happen around us. We then took that anger and that inability to recognize how our society was treating us and created a story from it. Back to what I was talking about. It's those stories that created the laws. It was those stories that made it possible for all of us to be equals. It's those stories and the recognition of what they did that allowed gay marriage to come about. All of this is so integrated.
Right.
It really is essential that every one of us understand, no matter what you did, even if you just spoke one word, you are part of the solution. That's the essential part. Every one of us who attended here today is still part of the solution because it is not dated. It will never be dated in our lifetimes. Neither will anti-Semitism, neither will racism. It will always be. Every moment we must stand up as individuals and as a society with stories to create those solutions and constantly recognize the solutions. What are we dealing with right now as a society? All the solutions that we've come up with, that bastard has undercut them. Right? I mean, really, our fundamental values have been attacked. And that is something that we need to always be vigilant for. Some of us didn't vote last time. That's why we got what we got. This time we better fucking vote.
It's all interconnected. You know, when you look at the Matthew Shepard story in 1998, in 1996 was the March on Washington. That huge, gigantic LGBTQ March on Washington. That really was born out of, as Tim is saying, years of a kind of activism that was a no-holds-barred activism that was fighting for its lives and empowered so many people to come further out in freedom. And what we were also doing through activism, through Queer Nation and ACT UP, it was an education tool. It wasn't just random anger exploding. It was how do we educate on a specific issue? What do we want? What do we need to get? What is the agenda? And you had talking points. I was in those groups. So you had talking points, you had specific goals to get out of them. Very clear business plans for these actions. In the process, one of them was to educate the media, to educate the people around the FDA, or around the CDC, or around a particular politician. So we could, and in that process, we did educate journalists, writers, other people, ourselves. It was part of ourselves, to the point where the march in Washington happened in DC, and people came out for the first time that they'd never marched. So that kind of activism pushed those closet doors open and freed so many people and educated those people to the point where we knew what a hate crime was. Politicians understood that if they stood on the side of this being a hate crime, how many hate crimes like Matthew Shepard had there been in the past? Innumerable, uncountable, completely uncountable. And so it landed at a moment when suddenly a politician could come forward and not feel like he or she was losing their base, but they were doing the right thing, and that the energy was going to be behind them. The money would be behind them, the support would be behind them, because the tide had shifted over the course of the 90s. So it becomes one of those markers of the 1990s activist movement that was changed. If it had happened in 1991, I don't think we would be here today. We wouldn't have known about it. It would have disappeared. As one of the characters says about the Mormon church, being excommunicated, disappeared. I see, whenever I hear that line in the play, I feel for that character at the same time that I go, and Matthew Shepard's story could have disappeared, and how many of the others have disappeared, like the patrolman, although that's not a hate crime, but still that these things vanish if we don't witness them and hold on to them and say, here is the witnessing. Here it is, So,
and Jason can speak to this too, but the Shepards worked doggedly to advocate for that hate crime legislation. It went through two George W. Bush terms.
No.
It was Obama who signed it into law. It was the James Byrd and Matthew Shepard Act.
right.
The cops who were represented in the play went to Washington, D.C. Judy and Dennis went to Washington, D.C. I mean, they would be told by the senators and people, yes, we're going to vote for this, and then they wouldn't. It was like an effort, like a very concerted effort over a long period of time to get that hate crime legislation passed.
And that was passed under the Obama administration. Jason, can you talk about that process? And you were thrust into getting involved no matter what.
Yeah, LGBT inclusive hate crime legislation proposals existed 5 to 7 years before Matt's murder. In 1991, the FBI was directed by Congress to start, because Congress was controlled by the Democratic Party, to start tracking hate crimes nationwide and issue an annual report. At that time, the Hate Crime Statistical Collection Act, as it became known, was a piece of broader pro-LGBT hate crimes reform, but only the statistical collection portion of it passed and was signed by the first President Bush. So the act to expand the categories from race, religion, ethnicity, and national origin to include sexual orientation, gender, and gender identity, as well as disability, was just languishing in Congress, and particularly after the Republican takeover of Congress in 1995. But it was Matt's story that brought this languishing legislation back to everyone's attention, and it was one of the first things that Judy seized on as a tangible outcome from Matt's murder that would be helpful for law enforcement, would help the community understand the risk, would indeed be the first pro-LGBT or protective legislation for our community in Congress, rather than legislation that sought to curtail LGBT equality. But it became a symbol of political division in Washington. And I've always believed that it was because Republican leadership in Congress and in the second Bush administration did not want to have the LGBT community be seen to get a win. I think it was really just about depriving our community of a win, and that never had anything to do with political philosophy. It never had anything to do with the actual impacts of the legislation. As I think is evidenced by the fact that after it finally passed, it's become completely banal and nonpartisan in most of the country and to most members of Congress. But it took unified democratic control of the government to bring it back to the front of the line and to get it signed, and it still took 9 or 10 months, even under that regime, because of stalling tactics in Congress, particularly in the Senate. And honestly, I think it was Judy's tireless work for 11 years, keeping this story in the headlines, combined with the broader social shift around LGBT rights that was going on, and the sort of rising tide that lifted all boats in the progressive movement that was the 2008 Obama campaign. All of those things were necessary, I think, in order to get that act through Congress, and it continues to be nearly impossible to get any further pro-LGBT legislation out of that body, be it employment non-discrimination or other issues that remain unresolved at the federal level.
Thank you. I was thinking how nowadays, or at least for me, I think of those people who go after those stories and who make things happen are journalists. And so I do think it's interesting that you went to Laramie, you and your colleagues went to Laramie, not really knowing what it is, what's going to come out of the experience, but you just felt like as artists, you needed to be there and you needed to find a way to get involved and you wanted to say something about it. And so I'm curious, what was it, a radical idea? I guess if you didn't think a play was coming out of it, what were you thinking? What did you think would result from that?
Well, we were thinking about do artists have anything to say about what's happening? I mean, it's an interesting moment. Like when we were there, we didn't plan it this way. A lot of auspicious things fell into place, right? So Tectonic Theater Project has a suffering 501c3. We had no money. But we had this play that was our first hit. It was The Three Trials of Oscar Wilde. And it ran downtown New York for a long time. And the company had a little bit of money in the bank. So Oscar Wilde funded the Laramie Project. At least the first one. But we got it. So we had this little bit of money. Back in the days of like phone books and telephones, right? So I was on the phone, like finding motels, and it's football season, so everything was booked, and we were learning about that, and how do I get there? And so we were like, what do we do? And we got there 3 weeks after Matt died, and the media was pretty much packing up shop and leaving. And the people were very stung by how they were portrayed in the media. And so we showed up, and we were like, what's it like to live in Laramie? Like, what? It was very disarming, and then they wanted to get it right. Like, they didn't really think about we're theater people. A lot of them had never even seen a play, Like, somebody said to me once, is it like summer stock? Yeah, I guess, summer stock, sure, if that's your reference for theater, like, sure, we're like summer stock. But it didn't matter. It was that we wanted to hear their stories, and they wanted to set their record straight somehow, right? So, but I had many, many interactions with journalists because we would see them in the courtroom and different things along the way. And I remember this one woman saying that how much she envied what we were doing, how much she longed to spend time in the place and get to know people and linger there. But the media was like on to the next story, right? So it was a different project. It was a more contemplative process, a spacious process, and a very personal one. And the relationships that we formed with the people have, in some cases, been lifelong relationships.
You think about, seeing it and watching it, it feels very balanced, and compassionate. And isn't that what artists are here to do, to find sort of the humanity in all the characters? And sometimes the media, obviously the media doesn't necessarily, that's not their primary goal. Can you imagine Fox and CNN telling this story together? Very interesting. I want to open this up for questions from the audience.
Thank you. I'm a teacher on Cape. I always look at this through the eyes of children. I have a theater class, theater social issues in 7th grade. So I see those, mostly boys, in 7th and 8th. They go on to high school already. Now they're with the 12th graders. I want to see this cathartic experience start there. And I would love to see the possibility of teachers writing grants to bring this to the schools. Are you involved in any educational outreach? And if so, do you think 7th grade is a reasonable age for this type of experience? It's very lyric. I love the fact that it was empathy driven in every way. I mean, it serves as such a great teacher for everyone. So just wanted to put that out. I, would love to see these local cultural councils get grants, to bring in even pieces of it. Because we have a picture of Matthew Shepard in our library on our little shelf of heroes. But nobody knows who he is. He's this boy with a big mouth and braces, smiling right at you in the library. And I mentioned it in the theater class that they go running to see, and that's all they see is the picture. And I would love for kids to start getting seeds planted. Because I know they're struggling. I see them. I teach them theater. I see these boys. And I want to see a more comfortable time for them as they move on to the high school and they have everything in place in the high school, all the organizations and the clubs, and they get organized there, but not for middle. So it's a little bit of a conundrum, and I wanted to put that out to you. With your experience, what do you think?
Oh, God. God bless you for teaching middle school. Oh, my God. My parents are both teachers. My father was a reading teacher. My mother was a music teacher, so musical theater. Here I am. So,
Can I just say one thing?
Yes,
We
sure.
should invite her class to come see
Yeah, we
us.
should invite our class to
Yes.
come see it.
Yeah.
That definitely. There's a lot of programs on Cape, but most of them have to do with sort of song and dance stuff. It's like comedy improv group, or they're playing activities. When you get into like, this is a good, because as Leigh was saying, the common language of people is so accessible. It sounds like a movie or a TV show. It sounds now, like I noticed, for instance, the killer is saying dude at one point, and this is 20 years ago, and I was like, wow, dude's been around a long time. Like I hadn't thought, like in 1998, that these guys were just in the Midwest were using these terms. Anyway, the point is, I think they would have access to it emotionally fast, and the characters too. Like I was saying, most of these characters are straight, but so there's a lot of access to them, for the rest of us. But yeah, I'd be totally into bringing it. I don't think 7th grade is too young. What's that, 13? Not at all, not at all, not at all.
We have a very enlightened principal, so I think I will plan to see there first.
Go ahead, let's stay in touch and they'll figure it out.
If they're ready for Game of Thrones, they're ready for this.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Come on.
Serious.
I think they dig it. I mean, it is lyrical and stuff, but it's straightforward.
Straightforward.
Has a
But as part of just this play,
Yeah.
What you have done, being a middle school administrator, a former one, this could be done in conjunction with the Legacy Walk. So the Legacy Walk in Chicago has a wall of people who are identified as GLBT with biographies. It's online, it's visual, so it's not just the play, but that we still are living with some examples in our lives that have been redacted from our history, and kids love to explore. And so presentations given to universities, that I've done, and it's just really important to have that as an ongoing thing, because you're right. Whether they're junior high, middle school, they're questioning, and we need to give them the support. And I absolutely was so impressed with the staging, the writing, the connections that you built within people and the actors, it was amazing. And it should be taken on the road. So grants, I know that Parent Teachers Organization, for example, we did an education foundation in my particular district where you would apply to bring this particular play into that particular school and do a whole sequence, which I think is really important because we need education more than anything right now.
Good.
I have 2 words that come back to me today: immersion and resonance. And I think what all these characters that show up, without the presence of Matthew himself, we are immersed into the world where Matthew lived. And at the same time, we resonate because it's not only resonating with Matthew, but with all the characters that are involved in this whole thing. And so we become present to it. And to me, that is the essence of a play that's successful. And the fact that the dialogue afterwards has not been about Matthew so much as it has been about how it resonates in our lives is really what makes us so successful, I feel.
Bill?
Some in the audience may or may not know that the theater company here has reached out to the Nauset Regional High School folks. They would have been here today. They're coming on the 20th of October. Wellfleet Oyster Fest was competing with us today, and they're all down there. But they did present it. They did win a statewide award for it when they presented it.
Right.
And what came to my mind, because I also contacted the middle schools, and I was getting pushback that it might be, I didn't use the phrase if they can watch the Game of Thrones, they can watch this, but there was some pushback about age appropriateness. And I was wondering, from a organizational standpoint with the Shepard Foundation, or Leigh, with your group, when this is licensed to high schools, if there could be a teacher or some kind of guide that goes along with it, so that the high schools in the local communities could then extend the invitation to the middle schools, those local communities, and it's community to community as opposed to a group coming from the outside and trying to tell a story to a bunch of young kids. They'll listen to their brothers and sisters and cousins and parents maybe more than they would listen to somebody from the outside.
There's a program the foundation has.
So with our Legacy Media Support program, we provide an extensive set of resources to educators who are putting on productions of the Laramie Project, including a guide on how to establish effective community dialogues, as well as a guide on how to advocate for the production in the first place, because there are, in fact, school administrators and district administrators who occasionally get in the way of this play being put on. It's a little bit random. You wouldn't necessarily guess that any given production would turn out to have a difficult superintendent of schools involved in the process. It was a really great, and I think very affirming private school in Canada that needed about a week's worth of patient questioning and answering from the foundation to get them comfortable with the work being put on. But yes, often the high school theaters make the play available for younger kids to rotate through and view performances. And increasingly the play is taught by English teachers amongst Shakespeare and other stage theater authors in the English language curriculum. And we've worked with educators and advocates to put together useful classroom resources, teaching guides, student exercises, curricula, etc.
I just want to add one thing to that. I know we're kind of going long, but one of the best years of my life, artistic life and life in general, was when Tectonic got a grant from the Arcus Foundation that we could go to the places where the Laramie Project was banned. And that was the whole purpose. We were like the gay, the gay troop would go in and help them make their productions, right? And it was amazing because as soon as you tell a kid that they can't do something. They're really gonna do it. So we were like rehearsing in the backyards of these lesbians, were rehearsing in their backyards, and I was back there teaching them moment work, and they were moving the furniture around, and the kid raised his hand and he said, well, my director told me never to move when someone else is talking. This is a different kind of theater, and we were like back there doing it. But I think for me, it's about, because it's a gay play, it's controversial, or it's seen as controversial. If you really break it down, if you take out the swear words of this play, there's absolutely nothing controversial about this play. It's like people talking about something that happened, right? So it's just very interesting to me, like how do we have these conversations and just take that word controversial away completely, because these are the things we need to be talking about.
Compassion, love, hope,
Right.
big message of the play. On that note, I want to thank our panelists, our esteemed panelists.
Two things. One, I want to thank Bill Docker on behalf of the board of the theater for helping put together these panels. Thank you. I also wanted to put Leigh on the spot and ask you to tell us about the play you're working on now.
Oh, geez. Okay, so it's a Victorian lesbian epic. Which will, so hopefully David will bring here at some point. Yes, it's a group of women who lived in Rome, had an artist colony, famous actress, sculptors, painters, poets. They lived in Rome, they created art, they had all kinds of lesbian affairs. Anyway, the woman's name is Charlotte Cushman. She's our protagonist, and her wife of 40 years is a sculptor named Emma Stebbins, who was the first female to ever receive a public art commission in New York, who made the famous Angel of the Waters in Central Park, the Bethesda Fountain. So the Bethesda Fountain, made famous in Angels in America, has an untold lesbian history behind it, that I am avidly working my ass off to bring to big star.
Big stage stars.
Big stage stars, actors, yeah. So, coming soon to the theater.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. For a second, could you take a picture of all of that, including the,
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Jules.
Is it all right? Poet? Yeah, you can go.
There's one on there. Is it yours or not?